I have today a special guest. He's been my mentor, my friend, and my brother since the age of 24, 25 years old. He's the one that introduced me to the Nicholson Group. He's the one that introduced me to Reynolds and Reynolds, and he's the one that brought me with him to R.O. Polk and Company. This guy means the world to me. Dr. John, welcome, sir.
Whew, Richie Bello, thank you so much for that welcome. I hope to live up to those expectations. And you, my friend, you look about 100 pounds less than the last time I saw you.
Yes, I lost a little bit of weight. Yeah, a little bit. Yeah. I'm happy. Life is good, and everything's great.
Yeah, I'm so proud of you.
So, Dr. John, I want to engage with you a little bit with this COVID-19, the online business. I mean, I'm really big with the digital platforms today.
Yes,
and
of course.
And with Look Smart, that's a public company that I'm with. We're big on big data marketing, which works really good with Google. And your product, I was talking to my partner in it, Michael Onhai, he's the CEO of Look Smart. I was saying, my friend Dr. John has this product, Call Coach, and everything now is appointment setting and online, and he has a lot of data. We got 2 data warehouses out in Arizona. So I want to talk about this product, what it really means in the marketing platform. But not only that, today with COVID-19, if you don't have something for appointment setting and a software like yours, and the training that you do is amazing. So why don't you share with us the whole Call Coach and all that information?
Sure. Thanks, Richie. I appreciate that. Well, let me start. This goes way back, actually, about 20 years when we were taking a look at how you'd go about training people on phone skills. And the first break that we got after having done it the old way was when we realized that there were companies that would record these inbound phone calls. And so we then became more familiar with the big 3, we called them in those days, of individuals that were recording these phone calls. And so what we started to do then was we applied to each of these big 3 companies, and we went to them and said, can we actually have access to the data? Now, this is interesting. The reason that they recorded the calls was they wanted to figure out whether the marketing was working, right? So you'd put a different toll-free number in different advertising sources. And so therefore you would see which one of those phone numbers was making the cash register ring. That was their pure love for this at the time. And then it was to get data, but it wasn't to really gather the data like what we looked for, which was how was that person handling that inbound phone call? And so now we had the methodology, we had the toll-free numbers where when you use that number, it gave you the opportunity to be able to identify how well that call converted from a phone call to a showroom up, basically, to an appointment to an up. So that's how it started, Richie. It was really kind of a stroke of luck because when these companies came along that were recording them, back in 1996 is when the federal government gave the public the access to be able to record those phone calls. And so, of course, in most of the states, I think in over 40 of the states, it's a 2-party just needs to know they're being recorded. Like this call may be recorded for quality purposes. And so anyway, the long story short was when we started getting the data, we found out that some of the marketing and advertising companies that were doing a terrific job of getting the phone to ring were getting bad raps because the dealer, or the sales manager, or the general manager would look at the data and say, we put a $5,000 in the advertising source on Saturday's paper, and we didn't get any increased business. We would start to listen to the phone calls, and we realized that they got plenty of increased business. They just didn't know how to close that business. They didn't know what to say on that telephone call to allow them to know how to be able to convert that phone call to an appointment, to a showroom up, and then to a sale. So in answer to your question, the call coach then came about. As we started listening to these phone calls, we did an analysis. It's kind of a simple concept, right? We listened to calls and from all over the country, hundreds and hundreds and thousands of phone calls, and we identified what did the successful call handler do or say, or frankly not do or say, to be increasing the probability that they would have the conversion from a phone call to a showroom up, which we then realized that you needed to set an appointment. So Call Coach, in essence, is one product that allows us to be able to listen to those phone calls. And then we give a lot of feedback, very granular feedback on high-level information. Number one, did you set an appointment? And if you set an appointment, what were the steps that you followed in order to do that? And what we found, Richie, was it was startling to us that almost every person that did a few things correctly in the beginning of that phone call were able to convert that individual to an appointment, a lock-in an appointment that would then therefore show up at high ratios and even buy at high ratios. Does that make sense?
No, Dr. John, I'm glad you brought that up because, your whole thing, right, is left brain and right brain. So you have the software, right?
Yep.
You have the process, but not only that, then you assess the people. Brandon Haddison did a blog today on my site talking about human resource today,
yes.
right?
Yes.
It's very important. And that's what you are also, by the way. People don't realize that you are human resource. You analyze, assess, because you're a psychologist, right? So you do all that first. Then you put the right people in the right place with the software that enhances the process. And then you have one of the best process ever. Like when I was working with PCS Global, remember my younger years?
Yes.
You had Blomo there, right? Okay.
Yeah.
So I learned from you the V-Track, and you said, Richie, this is perfect for you. I want to buy that thing one day. I've told my partners about it. They said, okay. So I love it because that's really relationship. But that only works when you put the right person at the right place. And you're like a whole package. It's not just about that. And Brandon today runs a very successful dealership, which is the Jim Ellis Group. They got 18 dealerships. And Brandon is very good. I mean, there's nobody like, I swear, Brandon's one of the best out there like yourself, I mean, but the difference is you assess people because we can't replace people. Let's face it, CEOs, we're only as good as the people under us.
Only.
The whole thing is about delegation. And if you delegate it to the wrong person, and with your system and your process and your software, that's what you bring to the table. Share with us that whole assessment process you have and everything, which I love.
Thank you very much, Richie. Well, we've evolved over the years with that information. I started off, as you said, I have a doctorate in psychology, and I've been a therapist for many years. And in the conversion from being a therapist to being a business consultant, we realized that the real quality differences are people. I don't care how beautiful your brick and mortar. We've seen people, as you well know, sell plenty of cars, new and used, and service in places that you wouldn't necessarily be proud to look at. But the people have the heart power and the skills to be able to take care of you. So we started to notice the people who were successful in doing certain positions had certain character traits. And so it was like this, and when we go into dealerships, we'd say to a dealer, do you train your people? And he goes, well, not so much. He says, because look, he says, if we train our people, he says the turnover was like 144% in the front end in the first 3 years, at least the first year. I said, if we train our people, he says, and they leave us, he says, then we basically have trained our competitor. And we said, look, there's something worse than training your people and they leave is not training them and they stay. So we believe that it's important to hire right from the start. You're so right on that statement. And I'll talk about that in a minute, how you hire right from the start. But then you provide that person lifelong training so that they can keep up with what skills they need in order to be successful at their current position. And here's what we know. So we know, for instance, that certain people are drawn to certain positions naturally. And I'll give you an example. Like you talked about the CEOs of company. Those of us that run companies as presidents or CEOs, or even sometimes chief strategy officers, people that are in chief positions have this certain innate drive that they want to be perfectionistic and they want to get closure and they want to be as best they can foolproof and making few mistakes. And they're not afraid to make mistakes, but they're quick to recover from them. They're willing to take risks, but they're calculated risks. We call those people high red. We have 3 dominant floors, red, green, and gray. High red, strong leaders, takes charge of people, knows how to be able to say the right things at the right times. They don't rest easily. They multitask a lot. They have a purpose in life and they're driven for it, right? They may be sitting in front of that pool that looks pretty inviting, but at the same time, they may not go into that pool every day because they're pretty busy working, right? So what we've learned is that those people, for instance, that are the high red, we call it, high charge, high drivers, high purpose focus, they're the leaders. They're the people who are extremely good in taking those calculated risks, and they're willing to take it at the CEO level, at the sales manager level, at the BDC or kind of RMC level manager. Now we have other people, for instance, the higher the green, we call it. We assess these. Green is care, compassion, sensitivity. They love loving. They care about people. They care about animals. They have pets, right? They're gentler. They're softer. They're easier spoken. They're not as much driven by leadership, but by relationships and connections. And so what we now know is those high green people are terrific, for instance, on a phone call or on an internet lead, right? They're like, "Hi, how you doing today? Nice to see you." There's not a great salesman that's alive that looks forward to having phone calls with people if they're not selling. Right. The phone is not an easy tool to be able to conquer. I'll get back to that one also in a minute. But the point is, when we start looking at the higher the green in the person that we measure, care, compassion, and sensitivity, the more that person wants to affiliate with people, and the better they are at being able to communicate with people by phone, internet, or face-to-face. And so they start to build these relationships, and it's the relationship that we know today is what sells. I mean, the relationship today is the answer to your point earlier. It's like, in this digital world, it's who you know. It's how you go about communicating that, right? And then there's a third component, by the way, we call gray. Gray is quiet, introspective, reflective, calm, imaginative, creative. And these are individuals that prefer to be kind of alone or by themselves. Right? They make the world's best technicians, right? They're the best specialists on doing things like any technical kinds of activity. They're not the front guy or gal that likes to communicate with people. They're not like you or I. Our gray is last in our hierarchy, right?
Right.
So the point is back to your question. So what we found was if you wanted to be a manager in a company, a manager in a department, what that person would do, we would identify in advance that red traits, and then we would help them to hone that and to be more successful at using that. But the people that they typically manage are greens, right? Caring, compassionate, sensitive. So they have to manage them differently. I'll give you a quick example, Richie. I was called by a company from, it's a worldwide company this last year. I was called by this company and said that their U.S. presidents, their president and CEO was a terrific leader, except they'd gotten some complaints about him being angry, slamming his fist on the table, and swearing.
Wow.
So I said, let me guess. I said, he's extremely successful, and he's probably brought you a higher return on your investment than you expected, and you want to keep him. And she laughed. She was the HR person for their worldwide company. And she laughed. She said, yes, we do. And I said, well, he's got a red personality. And she says, what does that mean? So I explained it to her. And to the T, she says, that's right. So I said, because he's hard charging, he's driving, he's got this red impulse to push. However, I said, the people that are complaining are going to be green. They're going to be sensitive and caring. And they find that it's hard then for them to be able to work with someone that's pounding the table and yelling. And he doesn't mean it personally. He was frustrated. Long story short, we worked with this company, helped him to taper his temper. And we helped his people to understand him that that's the way he got things done. And so we kind of merged those two cultures of hard hitting and sensitivity to help them to grow. So back to the automobile world, what we now know, Richie, is that the people who are most successful in running a company have high red, like about a 90% red and maybe a 10% green or 10% gray.
Right.
People that are the best salespeople, they have a high red, but they also have a high green, right? They have to share people. They have to care about people. They have to show their emotions. So the red leader has to be able to lead red-green combinations of people. And then the technicians, the people are the world's best at being technically skilled. We have to be careful to make sure that they have enough alone time, their own private world that they work in. So we now hire right from the start, in our opinion, and then we train. So you're right, we do that. And that's one of the things that we've learned a lot. So it's not fair to judge a fish by its inability to fly, right? It's not fair because that fish will never fly, but it's a great fish. So if we can find the right people for the right positions, the right people for the bus in the right positions, you have a wonderful culture, and it's much simpler for that company to be successful.
I use your process that you showed me at Polk, very young, right?
Yeah, well, yeah, right.
Analyze, assess, and prescribe. But Richie, you got to be able to do that immediately.
Yes.
Because if you don't, they have the hand on you. And that's what really you bring to the table. And I've used that process throughout my entire life. Right after you showed me that process, I mean, gotta tell, we were really put through the mills with you. You were my boss and you were a hammer, but you showed me. And today, I look back at all the stuff I learned from you, Dr. John Menarchik. And you know what? That has helped me, not just in the business, it has helped me through life. It has helped me overcome the obstacles I've dealt with life, because that's the process that should be in training today, because that's what I've learned. That everybody knows out there that's watching me down. People watch me all the time. I've had a rough time, but you know what? And it's going to probably get rougher because that's who I am, right? It's only going to get rougher because that's just who I am. It's not going to get easy. I'm used to living on the edge, and I'm adapted to it. But what you showed me made me realize, and I got more mature, and that you helped me throughout my life. My entire, not just my career, my life. And that's the training I want to talk about today, because I go in and out of dealerships all the time. I talk to these corporate trainers, whether it's Penske, Sonic, Brandon, all the time. And here's the problem. They know, but they got a younger crowd today that's different, that's on digital. And the people are not there as much as they used to be. So it's a whole different process. But with what you bring to the table is knowing that person is good at this. So why not put them here and move this person here? Just the other day before COVID-19, a top salesman that's delivering 40 cars, the owner makes him a general manager. The guy hits the wall. Why? Because he's used to caring about himself. He's not used to caring about anybody else. He makes everybody's deals. That's not a guy to put in that position. And today is so important what you bring to the table, that it's got to be out there. It's got to, people got to know about it. You were a speaker at NADA how many times?
12.
12 times. At Digital Dealer, how many times?
I think 10.
10, and you were keto. I mean, it's amazing what you've done, and what you've done for guys like me, not to mention other names like Michael Stoll and all these guys. What you've done, you've been on us, at a younger stage. And that's why we are where we are, and let me tell you something. You have a great platform for training, for assessing, and finding solutions. Because it's about, if you have the wrong person, it's okay. That person might be talented somewhere else. Don't let them go. The cost of hiring somebody and the cost of training somebody is absurd. And then recruitment. All these deals are in Indeed. They're in Indeed right now. I have a veteran platform that we do e-learning. Right now it's shut down because of COVID-19. I don't have a place to train them. But let me tell you something. These vets are special, because when you do it right, you land them somewhere and they grow.
That's right. That's really true. And they grow in place, which is beautiful, right? I love that statement. I agree with you 100%. I love the training they have. I want to give back to them. I'm so thankful for what they've done to serve our country. And they're loyal. Once they find a home, right, they're ready to root in.
Well, here's the thing with vets. When you train a vet and you put them in the automotive workplace, vets sell to vets. It's a brotherhood. So now not only is he going to stay with you, and they're used to training. That's what their infrastructure is. I learned that going back and forth to Arizona 2 years ago. I learned from them. They only communicate with the brotherhood. So when you put a vet in a dealership, that vet is going to get referrals. And your average cars that you sell is going to drop. Instead of 400, you're going to be at 180, because he's in the VA. He brings people in. You got to understand, it's a really big process. And a lot of dealers don't even understand that. Penske BMW in Arizona has a department where there's 5 or 6 veterans that sell cars.
Oh, man, I didn't know that. That's terrific. What a great way to do it.
Because vets, you're giving back to vets, and they are bringing in their own customers.
Yes,
a lot of dealerships across the country are not using this towards their advantage and helping the vets, putting them in the workforce.
Interesting, Richie. Isn't that interesting? What a really nice way to take care of the folks that take care of us, right? What a win-win that is. We're seeing that today too with a lot of folks in the COVID virus situation, right? Where people are wanting to give back, and we're looking at a lot of people that are showing lots of love in that way. But you know what we refer to that is that's that green part of us, right? Each of us have those three parts in us: the red, green, and gray. And it was like that hemisphere stuff. Like we know that the right hemisphere, for instance, is different than the left hemisphere, right? The right hemisphere is like big picture, the ideas kind of person. They're very flexible. They're valuing timing. They like change, right? They prefer a variable pace. Whereas people on the left side, they're more thorough and detailed, and they're more consistent with their orientation, and they're more stable and unfanciful. So each of those two, for instance, like the difference between red and green, each of those two are really important. But you know, that they say, I think this is the most important statement. It's like the two most important days of your life are the day that you're born, and the second one is when you figure out why. You know, and when you figure out your why, like your purpose, it's like the Simon Sinek work, where when you really figure out what your purpose in life is, everything else falls in place, whether it's money and love and friendships and all that.
Everything falls in place. Like, for example, the institute that we did, right? Me and my partners did that in Arizona. We had a building. It's a real institute. What happens with that process? Okay, it's totally complimentary to the vets. No charge for training. If the dealership hires them, they pay us after 3 months. Okay, so they got to perform. Okay, and now they have the veteran workforce. Let me tell you, veteran marketing and veteran audience is very big in a lot of different industries. Okay, sure. Take a little company like, you know, JetBlue. JetBlue's got 60% of vets.
Yeah, wow.
Take companies like Valvoline. Take companies like Home Depot. They have a vet program. The automotive industry is missing that.
Wow. Yeah.
And I'm surprised that nobody has figured it out, because let me tell you, 2.5 years ago, that's when we built the Institute, you know, because it's a very, very important thing.
Really good points. You see, I look at that when you say that, I think that's what I call really good niche marketing, but it's also niche employing. Now, if I can take it to the next level, we look at the world in terms of people, in terms of personality or behavioral styles. So in other words, vet would be a slice of that. Love it, right? Another slice, though, again, think about this from a red, green, and gray perspective. From the U.S. population that we've surveyed, and we've got about a little over 500,000 people. We know that 60%, 6 out of 10 people in America lead with this green: sensitivity, caring, sharing. So think of it. It's like they put on this lens and they see things through this green lens, which are feelings, sensitivity, care. So when they come into a car dealership, their purpose is to not find the fastest or the sexiest looking car. Theirs is to find something that's comfortable, safe, and reliable. They want to make sure that their children in the car are very safe. They want to make sure that it's reliable, that starts for them, because they're usually not highly mechanical, right? It's not like they live for mechanical. They live for function and communicating with other people. So again, if we're going to communicate with people, we want to communicate with them in the style and with the language they understand. So it's care, it's sensitivity. It's, by the way, it's not asking questions either. So when you do qualifying, it's not about asking questions. It's gathering information from beginning, encouraging them to talk, versus you and I hire red, 25% of North American population. We lead with questions. We want facts. We want details. We want to understand the way the thing works. I want to understand I want to understand how the brakes are functioning. I want to understand what gas mileages I get. I mean, or the electric or hybrid. I want to understand those details, right? Grays, however, they rarely buy new. They almost always buy used, and they buy for function. They don't care about looks. And that's 15% of the North American population. So my point is, what we started to do, and let me tell you what we did. Can I speak of a dealership that I worked at for a while?
Yeah, absolutely.
When I was doing some early work at Jerome Duncan Ford in Sterling Heights, Michigan, that's before they were purchased by Suburban Group, which is a wonderful, wonderful big group. Jerome Duncan Ford, they were selling 180 cars a month. We were there 4 years. we started to do assessments and training their individuals that were in management roles. And then we trained, then there were 180 cars, they had 182 employees, kind of interesting. But we trained all of their employees in this common language that we're talking about today. Then we ended up teaching them how to assess those individuals when they came in on the showroom. Now think about how interesting this is, right? We ended up having all these 23 salesmen that were on the showroom to begin with. We took them off the showroom. By the way, when I say took them, we talked with them. We fostered this for them to understand that we were going to match them up with individuals. So it wasn't like they were losing something, they were gaining something. And we said, if it doesn't work, you can come back. But instead of having like the vulture feeling, like when you come into a showroom that somebody's going to jump on you, you want to be greeted. You want to be greeted in a polite manner, but you want to be greeted in a way that gives you the freedom of what you want. So for instance, when the person came in and they were assessed as red, hard charging, confident, fact finding, information gathering, we would, and dressed usually very professionally, right? We would say to that person, welcome to Jerome Duncan Ford. If you have any questions, will you please ask? But we'll allow you to be able to browse our showroom or look at the kiosks. Take your time. And oh, by the way, here's some drinks over here. They like coffee. Here's your coffee. Here's your tea. Here's some munchies and so forth. They would love that because now they don't feel like they're being like high pressured. We ask them a question. If you have any, will you please ask, and let them alone. And then we would give them a brochure. And the brochure, in this case, would be colored red. Same content that a green or gray gets, but this one's red. So now anybody that walks up to this person, they read this, holding the brochure, now we know to ask this person questions. We know this person's probably very critical thinking and they're analytic and so forth. So then we would go on the showroom, off the showroom, and contact one of the salespeople who best matched with the personality or that behavioral style of that individual customer or prospect, Richie. And then when the person was ready, we would have him or her come out. They introduce themselves in a very polite manner. We did have a couple of tables there, equally yoked. There was not like a power position, so that anyone that came in, the customer would have the same power as the desk as the sales consultant. And then they would sit down, talk about the cars and trucks, and they would do their demo ride. But we were finding that if we no pressured them, gave them this brochure about the dealership, but gave them the permission to be able to have freedom to look around, they were much more likely to buy. Oh, by the way, at that time, first time in, which was interesting, right? They weren't B-backs, they were buying then, which was fascinating. On the other side, we'd have a green come in, really shy, gentle, caring, not shy from a standpoint of people, shy because they want to be polite. They come in, hi, may I look around? Yes. That individual, we would not ask questions of, but what we then says, we would take them walk them over to where the tea was or hot chocolate or whatever it was, because they would want nurtured, right? They're green, they're caring, their people are in. And we would nurture them. We would gab a little bit. We would show them our wall of fame. Right. Mr. had a beautiful wall of fame and had all kinds of beautiful memorabilia there and awards and stuff. And then we would basically walk with that person. We would then have a sales consultant come out because we already told them we had a green. The sales consultant came out who was naturally green, paired that person up, and then they would walk the showroom. They'd walk the back lot. They'd look at the kiosk and so forth. My point is, we started matching those, and our sales went from 180 a month. When I left, as my witness, 700 a month, from 180 to 700. And what I'm most proud of, Richie, is today that same dealership is now at 900 a month. We weren't in the top 100 when we left. We were in the top 5 with Ford Motor Company. So we did that with common sense, communication skills, and then to your earlier point, we then would try to very much hire right from the start, people that fit that kind of mold, if you will. We had one gentleman there. His name was Joe. He was selling 40 some cars himself. When I went back there last year, he was selling over 70 himself.
Wow.
But what was interesting, Richie, in the early days, Joe was a tough guy. I loved this guy, but he was tough-minded, right? He would have 2 or 3 people out on demo rides on their own, right? So we said, that's probably not a good thing. We ended up hiring him. We hired him an assistant and said, look, you have everybody that takes a demo ride, you have your assistant go with them, and you have your assistant fill in the paperwork. And you might like this because this guy was he was learning disabled. He was extremely bright, but writing wasn't his skill set. Reading wasn't his skill set, but he was a people guy, as you might know, right? Get that. So anyway, long story short, he balked at first. He didn't like the idea of us having someone that was going to be there, but we said, we'll pay for it. We'll pay for him for 90 days. And we did. I said, but if it works out after 90 days, then you pay for it. So when I went back, I was telling you, not only did he went from selling 40 cars to over 70, I think 72 or 73 a month, He now has 2 assistants, and he pays for them out of his own income, and he makes more money than some dealerships because he's
Oh my God.
Isn't that kind of interesting though? It's a great story because
Dr. John,
just a great guy.
I'm so glad you brought that up because that's the thing I want to touch on.
Yes.
You got the software, but it's not just about the software. There's plenty of companies that have the software. What Dr. John's company is, you got the software, you got the process, but you got that psychology, you got that knowledge of human behavior, character, and personality that matches it into the software and into the process. So your cost of hiring somebody, Mr. Dealer, is going to drop. Your retention is going to increase. Your referrals are going to increase. So why wouldn't you dial the phone right now and call Dr. John? Okay, because it's the whole package. When I looked in my younger years, I was 24 years old, 25 when I met you. Yeah. How I sold cars, I always sold cars like this. Yes, asking the question, but I never worried about the question. I worried about the consumer's answer, because the answer is the wants and needs. It's not about the question. The question don't mean anything. The question is just a tree. It means nothing right now. Right. What it really means is how they answer that, what their reaction is to answer that, and how they address what you're asking them. That's the deal.
Yeah, that's really
and
big.
if you ain't got that figured out, you can ask people all kinds of questions on the phone and all this. It don't matter. And the problem with the phone is you can't see people, but it's if you read into what you're asking them, and they answer it, you're able to pinpoint it.
So good, Richie. Yeah, you really, you're a wonderful student. I love listening to you repeat some of these things and teach me. Let me add a couple things about the phone, if I may, because what we learned about the phone has been that it's significantly different skill set than a face-to-face communication, right? When you communicate face-to-face, you have what we call 5 behavioral cues. You have words, tones, gestures, postures, and facial expressions. Okay, words, tones, gestures, postures, facial expressions. When you're face to face, when you're on a phone call, you have words and tones. When you're on an email or text message, you have words. Now, yeah, you have capital letters and you have some emojis. By the way, I sent an email or a text message to my youngest son. It turned out to be all in caps, and he says, "Why are you mad at me?" I wasn't. I just was stupid. Didn't realize that you had to be careful about that. But anyway, so what happens is when you're on the phone, you, as a natural-born salesperson, right, you're curious and you notice whether they're wearing a wedding ring. You notice the shoes and if they're polished and how they present themselves, right? But on the phone, you've got words and tones, and so what we start to do is we start to teach people that the words now become extremely important on the phone, no different than the words are really all you have on an email or a text. So what we start to learn is that those words become extremely important. So not only what they say, I totally agree with what you said, right? You listen for what they say, but we also, I believe, we invite people sometimes correctly and sometimes incorrectly. Let me give you an example. So on an inbound phone call, here's what we've learned. This is what the best of the best do, right? Thank you for calling. And oh, by the way, if they've been on hold for longer than 30 seconds, if it goes into a receptionist, you should say, thank you for holding. It's a polite way to say, I'm sorry for you being online a long time. But hey, thank you for calling. And by the way, they call the receptionist. They said, this is Monarchic Motors. How may I help you? Sales, my pleasure. Put me on hold. Bring me. I say, thank you for holding. This is Doc. How may I help you? Now, it sounds little, but let me add how important that question is, right? Because first off, you should slow down when you take that first initial call, right? Thank you for holding. This is Doc. How may I help you? It's 3 distinct paragraphs. And I do not want you to hurry through it. I want you to take your time. I want that person to feel like they're the most important person in the world, right? But the point is that who's in control of an inbound phone call to begin with, right? It's the customer or the prospect because they called you.
Right.
What you do subtly when you say, thank you for holding, this is Doc, and then you ask a question. How may I help you? Now that puts me in control of the phone call because I've subtly taken control by asking that question. Very simple and subtle. And what happens next will determine, highly likely, we've got some data on this, highly likely whether that person is going to come in for an appointment, which is, by the way, when the person says, how may I help you? And they go, oh yeah, I'm calling in on that 2012 Camry you got advertised in the paper. Can I see that? Or do you still have it? I mean, right? So get this. Do you still have it? The question, now they returned it. So now they're in control of that, right? Do you still have it? Here's what we know, Richie. 87%, we got lots of data on this. 87% of the people that called in on a car buy a different car.
Right. Yeah.
Right? So it's like,
yeah.
So here's the problem. If I've got the car, I'm really in worse shape than if I don't have it. Because if I've got the car, what's the typical salesperson going to say? Sure, I've got it. Right? As opposed to starting to qualify the person and starting to qualify them in ways that helps to solidify that they together are going to need to work on getting that person in to see these cars or car. So back to the point. So can I help you? Yes, I'm calling in on that 2012 Camry. Do you still have it? 2020 Camry. I don't know. Let me check on it is the response, right? And then it's like this. And oh, by the way, what is it about that Camry? I'm taking control again. What is it about that Camry that caught your attention? Do you like it because it only had one owner? Do you like it because it's 4-door? Do you like it because it's a V6? Do you like it because it has a sunroof? And that's when you start to really get the information because you're qualifying now about what it was about that vehicle that made that person pick up the phone and call you. There is a huge transformation then in whether or not that person is likely now to be able to get an appointment and whether that person is going to come in from just that very first 35, 45 seconds of that call.
Let's rehash something. So the phone, the text, right? And walk-in. Let's talk about the text. Let me give you what my thought is about the text. My thought about the text is when you're receiving the text, it's your perception of what they're asking. You got to be very careful with that, right? Because you read it, now it's, wait a minute, what are they really trying to say, right? Now you got to understand because we know that your perception is reality. Whatever somebody perceives is reality. So a text is very careful. Always be with a text in a happy note, in a positive note. Send out something happy, right? Yes. Be careful how you address it because that's another thing that's coming to play now, okay? I see all these guys with texting and social media. The other day, 6 months ago, I went to a dealership. I said, Richie, this leads, this, that. I said, oh, really? Let me see. The marketplace had the dealership at 100 leads and nobody followed it up. Okay? Okay. Hello? I mean, could you imagine? Okay. So let me tell you, because why? Because when they don't even know how to answer it. So everybody's thinking, how should I answer it? What should I do? Before you know it, something else happens and they forget. Out of sight, out of mind. There's a big problem in our industry when the marketplace is getting so much traffic on Facebook and it's all message and there is no training. I haven't seen a trainer yet till this day have a training course about how to answer questions, how to work a text. Everybody knows the phones.
Yeah, that's right.
Everybody knows sales process, but find me a guy and let me sit down with him to talk about sending messages and converting those messages into at least a phone call.
At least
there's an opportunity there that's huge, and it's going to be more and more and more.
But no question, it's going to just grow and grow and grow. It's the future.
Grow, and I'm observing that, and I'm watching. Remember what you put me at Polk? You said Richie's observing. Watch, right? And Stephen Polk was there. He's observing. Remember that?
I remember that.
I'm not. Listen, I have dyslexic, and I have epilepsy, as you know. And I just observe. So I watch and I see, I said, oh my God, what's going on here? There is no trainer in any place that's teaching people how to get leads. And this is lead management. This is lead generation. Yeah. This is a major problem. All these chats, when you go on a website, nobody's trained to, okay, how do I answer? How do I put a call of action there
Cool.
to convert it? Okay.
Great point.
John, I have a chat service that we build, LookSmart and myself, in India, that is artificial intelligence. Okay.
Yeah.
It's going to be up on ShopSmart, making an announcement. I already shared it on a video. What it does, I'm going to send you the whole thing. What it does, it's using automation and artificial intelligence. We developed this 2 years ago, and now is when it's ready to go to the market. We've done A/B testing. Okay. This is key, important. Listen, use AI, use artificial intelligence. Mr. Dealer, come up with something. We've been seeing this being an evolution, going on and on and on, going to stores with certain salespeople that we have on the field, LookSmart, Clickable, and myself, getting the information about this. We don't have a solution for this, and this is about ready to blow up. The marketplace is going off the deep end.
It's going to be great.
Share with us what your thoughts are on this.
Sure. Thank you. I'm so proud to hear you say that. I spoke at NADA 6 years ago now, on artificial intelligence, and we actually gave some examples of it. It was certainly ahead of its time, and pharmacies have really capitalized on it. Some have, but our industry is like about to. And I think you just hit the nail on the head with that for sure. Let me give you an example. Let's talk about 7 words. I didn't tell John you were stupid. I didn't tell John you were stupid. 7 words. Now, let me read them, each with the emphasis on a different word, right? I didn't tell John you were stupid, but my wife did, right? I didn't tell John you were stupid, but I'm gonna. I didn't tell John you were stupid. No, I put it in an email, right? I didn't tell John you were stupid. I told the entire department. Or I didn't tell John you were stupid. You still are. I didn't tell John you were stupid. I told him you were a moron, right? So how you read those words are the filters by how you see them. So if I'm having a bad day and you send me a text message and I get hooked by that bad day, I'm likely to respond in an inappropriate way, right?
Right.
Or if our wife says something to us, you're right. So the really important thing about words is they're always open to interpretation. So if I said to you, hey, after this, let's go get lunch. And you go, okay. And then all of a sudden we hang up and we go to get lunch. It's like, wait, we can't go out and get lunch. The restaurants are closed, right? So in other words, it's like we have to learn to interpret. Or if I said to somebody, I have a meeting, well, it's a meeting online, or it's a video, or it's an audio, right? So my point is, you're so accurate with that texting. So here's what we see. We see that texting, by the way, is the most efficient way. Efficient. Now, it's not necessarily the most effective, but it's the most efficient way to send out to a person. Got this, before we call them, right? Think about this. Even today, we often text people because it's the polite thing to do. And we expect that the person that takes a text in, Richie, are going to respond to it relatively quickly, right? I mean, in theory, I'm not sure what the numbers are, but I don't have hard data on this, but I have a hunch that I think people expect a text to be answered within less than a minute.
Yeah, or maybe less, because that's why they're texting you.
Right? Exactly.
Email, they're texting you, it's less. They want a quick response.
Yeah.
When somebody texts you and they don't use your WhatsApp or they don't use your email, you better make sure you're replying quickly.
Right?
That's what they want. They want a quick response. So
well, remember in the old days when we used to get the leads across the fax machine, the fax machine would just dump them right into the wastebasket, right?
Right. Correct. So when somebody texts you, you better answer it. Then you better answer WhatsApp, right? They're not using your Facebook. They ain't using any other channel. They're using just that. Me, you know how I follow up. I'll follow you up on every platform all at the same time, right? That's what I do. But
once you got Richie,
I want a quick response.
Oh, amen to that. That's my buddy Richie. So the point is, the texting now becomes sort of like I call it a knock at the door.
Right.
It's sort of a simple knock at your door,
right?
But they're at the door, right? They're at the door. They're at your dealership door knocking, right? And they're trying to let you know I'm important. I want to just see, I just want to see how important you think I am. So my opinion, that's really the gateway to entry now is the text. And then once you pass that, and I'll get back to that in a second, but once you pass that test, then you've earned the right to the next level of intimacy, right? And that would be, in my opinion, a phone call. And a phone call, here's what I love about this, right? One of the things I love about technology is the fact that it's always changing. And so we now offer a click to call service, right? And here's why. So if let's say I'm on somebody's website and I'm looking at a vehicle or 10, each of those vehicles get paired so that when you click on that vehicle, if you want information, what's cool about that now is you fill in information that says John, right, Menarchek, here's my cell phone number, and here's my email address. If I'm online, the typical person's brain thinks that the person's going to respond to me online. Logical. So if I'm on there, I'm looking at a 2020 Cavalier, whatever, I'm looking at it. I've submitted. Here's what's interesting. What we found is if I can get back with that prospect in less than a minute. Now, it sounds absurd, but listen to this. If I can get back with that prospect in less than a minute, they're still probably on my web page or my website. Right. They're not on somebody else's, right? They're probably still on the looking right. They're not going, right, exactly. So here's what's cool about this. The click to call software says they submit it, and it goes into an electronic lead, but it's also digital. But what's cool is it now rings 1 to 100 people. You can pick how many ever. It rings their cell phone or their landline, and it says there is a lead on your website looking at that Camry. And if you pick that up, if you are the first, you win that. The person will ring that person's cell phone, or that phone number. And so I'm on the phone now. It's ringing. I'm a sales consultant, and it rings. And you pick up. And you go, hello, and I go, hello. Is this Richie Bello? Think of this, Richie. I love this, right? Is this Richie Bello? And now I'm going to know your name is right there. And you go, yeah. Who's this? Right? And it's going to go. Oh, by the way, this is Dr. John. You submitted a lead. You had some interest in this Camry, and just wanted to check out if that's the only vehicle you're looking for, or could I help you with something else? And the person goes, wow, that was fast.
Now you get him to talk about something else.
Right.
That's the whole idea, to get the customer to talk about something else. Yeah.
Right. It's perfect. Right.
Broke the ice. Boom. You just broke the ice.
You broke the ice. That's exactly right. And you're breaking the ice with somebody that has the knowledge about a vehicle. It's not. And by the way, I like BDCs, but I love this concept. If you're talking to a sales consultant that has submitted that lead to that sales consultant, and you can talk about that vehicle or vehicles or your inventory, you hit a home run. And always remember this one, Richie. I know you know this. You taught me this. Remember, with 87% of the people not buying the car they call in on, the advantage that we have from a dealership perspective than from a one-off, right? If you call me, if I've got my Traverse out in the yard for sale, and you call me and you say, hey, I'm calling about your Traverse. Guess what I'm going to talk about? The Traverse. Right? I'm not talking about your needs. I'm talking about my car.
Wants and needs, right?
Yeah, wants and needs. I'm talking about you want my car, right? So I'm talking to you about my car. As opposed to if I'm in a dealership and I got 100 or 200 or 500 units there, I can say to you, oh, sure, you called in on that Traverse. What is it about that Traverse that caught your attention? Because I got 100 more like that. Now, you are so much ahead and shoulders above the one-off guy that's got one down the street. One owner yet, but you got to buy my Traverse because that's all I got, right? So point is, you start looking at your leverage points and you identify in this case that you now have the ability to have this person who's contacted you about, let's say it's Traverse. Now I can say, well, listen, now are you interested in a Traverse because it's got that towing package, or are you interested in it for kids, or how is it you're planning on using this? And you qualify with the phone, right? And then they go, well, I got 2 kids, but I got to pull a little motor home. It's a little camper, and we go fishing a lot. Oh, okay. Now you're thinking then the Traverse is more because you can pull 5,000 pounds, or would you like something that's maybe a bit smaller? How big is your trailer? So now I start to qualify that person. I get to know where they go fishing. I learned some good fishing holes, by the way. And then I get a chance to be able to help that person become a very enthusiastic buyer, because I'm caring about them, not about selling my car. Make sense?
Absolutely. You know, Dr. John, I want to touch on something too. When we were with the Nicholson Group, right? You remember that?
Yeah, I love it, man.
It always said, is it easier to sell a friend or a stranger? So the answer is, yeah, it's easy to sell a friend. Okay, so today with all this information and everything, is it easier to sell somebody you've mentored? So why not mentor all your prospects by educating them, right?
So
Now,
good.
is it easier to sell that? Absolutely. So now that's a whole different process. That's one of the trainings that I have, right?
Yes.
That I do, that I teach knowledge selling, because knowledge selling, I'm mentoring you. So
Yeah.
it's much easier to sell you anything because now I have the knowledge. I'm mentoring you. Says, wow, now I just sold, right? That's
Yeah.
selling.
That's
Okay.
right. That's perfect.
I'm going to touch something. You are one of the best with every employee counts. You
Yeah,
have a course about that.
we do.
And you use it in major industries and other industries. The automotive industry, I see dealers spending $2,500, $3,000 on an average a month, big auto groups on Indeed. So I say to myself, there's a product out there that's called Every Employee Counts. Dr. John showed me that, right? And you're one of the best at it. Major companies like Polk used to have that with you,
Sure.
the Nicholson Group, Reynolds and Reynolds. That's what you did in the bigger enterprise organizations. And today they use that. Now, I want to talk to you about that because that's something that's needed in our industry. Instead of running an Indeed ad, 3,500, then laying out 15 grand for training, now you're up to 15, 3,500. Why not gather all your employees and every employee counts? Share with us that process.
Sure. You have such a good memory. I'm so impressed with that, Richie. Thank you for recalling that. Every employee counts basically says this. If I'm going to think about somebody else, we know human nature thinks about me first. So it's like we always are in self-preservation mode. And for me to be comfortable in who I am is a requirement for then me to be comfortable with you. So in other words, it's about me first. But get this, it's about every employee counts. So it's like what we do is we work on giving people their behavioral styles or personality types, and then we practice with that. We have them learn about themselves first. And then you learn about your small work group. And then you're prepared to be able to communicate with those that are strangers, so to speak. We know that this world is about relationships. I mean, relationships matter. It's what makes life worthwhile. I don't want to be on my deathbed and say, I wish nobody around me and say, I wish I had worked one more day in the office, right? I want a loved one or my loved ones around me or my family if I'm going off to heaven or if I'm in a situation where I want to be, taken care of. So every employee count says this. If I can make my employees, if I can make them the best people they are, then by accident, they're going to be the best employees. And we know that the best employees are much better able to make relationships with strangers to bring them into their value proposition and to be able to help them to get what they need the most, right, taken care of. I remember back you mentioned Nicholson, one of my lifelong heroes. Steve is now in heaven, but I remember Steve came to me one day and he said, I'd like you to come with me. He says, I'd like you to come to talk with Nancy Tyne, who was the Chevrolet training director. And I go, okay. Now I just had met Steve, right? This is the way this works, this relationship. We walk in and Steven's like 6'5" and I'm 5'9" and like Martin, right? Yeah, big guy. Yeah, boy, right? We walk into Nancy Tyne's office, National Chevrolet training director. We walk into her office. She knows, hi, Steve, and he introduced me as Dr. John. We sat down on these chairs here. She's up on this kind of elevated platform because she's relatively short. And so she's up there behind this desk and she says, well, Steve, she says, how's it going? He goes, pretty good. He says, and I didn't know this. He goes, we've just finished the research for you. And she says, okay. And I find out it's the retail operating system, the ROS, for all the Chevrolet dealerships across America. And they had done their research and they're putting this together and they shrink wrapped it. It's ready to go out. And so she says, well, Steve, what's your thought about how we're going to distribute this retail operating system to all these thousands of dealerships? And Steve looks at me. I'll never forget this day, Richie. He bumps me. He's on my right. He bumps me on my shoulder and he said, yeah, Doc, tell her how we're going to roll that out. And I go, I'm sitting there thinking, oh, I'm sweating bullets, Richie. And I said, I look at him. He goes, yeah, tell her. And I said, well, you said you're going to send them out like in this, they're going to be like shrink wrapped. You're going to send them out to all the dealerships and you're going to expect that they're going to read them. And I said, Miss Tyne, I said, in all due respect, I said, that's going to be a very expensive doorstop. It's never even going to get unshrink wrapped. They're going to keep their door open with it. And she starts laughing because I'm figuring we're going to get thrown out now. She starts laughing. She says, oh, thank God. And she looks at Steve and says, I knew you guys would have a plan for this. And it wasn't just shrink wrapping and sending out, because her point was this, as was Nicholson's. If you want to make cultural transformation, it's got to come from your heart and soul, and you got to do it with people, and they got to know that your heart and soul are in it, right? You can't send them this operating 5-inch binder and say, here's your it, right? So it's about people, right? It's about employees first. So we believe it's imperative to hire right from the start, hire the right people for the right position, make sure you train them effectively, right? And then you reinforce them. And by the way, most people, to be honest with you, most don't work for money. Do they need money? Sure. But no, there are multiple ways to get money. They work for their passion. They work for their love. They work for their joy. They work for their why, the Simon Sinek stuff.
Exactly.
Yeah. So about every employee counts. It's about letting people realize that we as employers or company owners or managers, we have an investment in them. We get to know their children's names, their spouses' names. You find out what's important to them so that then they want to give you the best of them, as opposed to trying to force them to punch a time clock and so forth. So we believe it's about heart power. Every employee counts is how the best way to run your company.
And I'm going to say this. I was with the Nicholson group before you got in there with Bob Gray.
That's right. Oh yeah. Bob Gray.
When you got there, okay, that's what I saw the difference. Steve Nicholson, may his soul be rest in peace, because he was a great man to me. I love the guy. But he was always he was where he was at because he picked the right people. Then you came into the picture and you assessed all the consultants, right? With that testing that you did.
That's exactly right.
Now you put them in the right place, like Ned Tookman, good on the phones.
That's right.
Bob Gray. And that's what made the whole thing. And then that made it into an acquisition with Reynolds and Reynolds.
That's right. Yeah.
And then when you took Reynolds and Reynolds over, I was there. I remember Reynolds and Reynolds just sold you technology. You came in and says, wait a minute. Don't sell technology. Boom. So you put the same process in there. Another acquisition. Boom. You took it to Polk, right? And then
that's right. That's what we did.
I don't know this about you. I do, because I lived it. Then you took that in there, and then bang, when you left a few years later, Polk does an acquisition with IHS. And guys, listen to me. This guy, you don't know, he's done major development acquisition based on his training in the enterprise. So I look at this. This is the guy I want, a guy that has that kind of track record. Then you went to Call Source. Okay.
Yeah.
And you made it all. I mean, and that's what it is, Dr. John Menarchik, you bring so much to the world, to the world, and especially what the knowledge you possess is amazing. Doctor, I want to do more lives with you, if that's okay, because it's a pleasure having you as a guest. And you know what? It's got to get out there. It really, you have to get out there, because what you've done already. And now it's time to move the needle, because the world needs to get trained on not only social selling, right? Knowledge selling. And that's another facet that we got, because it is much easier to sell somebody you're mentoring than that's a friend. And it's much easier to sell a friend. So when you combine them all, it's amazing. And Dr. John, thank you so much for coming into the show. I so much appreciate you my entire life, and I love you.
Love you, brother. Peace.
Peace, brother.
Be well.
Be well.